Let's go into our 3-on-3 questions. The first one, the Blazers followed up that road trip going 4-1 with 3 straight losses at home. What would you pinpoint as the biggest reason for Portland's poor performance over the past 3 games?
I think there are a lot of things that you can say.
Oh,
I think
this is such a loaded question.
I think this is the one we're easily going to spend the most time on here today. I'm going to start off by saying that, and I touched on it earlier, that we saw a little bit of the issues that have now really come to the forefront. We saw them in the road trip, but they were masked because the Blazers won.
Right.
You know, the Nets, the Blazers gave up 125 points to the Nets. The Blazers had to score 127 to win that game. The Wizards, the Blazers were pretty fortunate to come back. I believe it's still the largest fourth-quarter comeback this season. They were down 17, and they're able to come back and win that game. That's not a game they should have won.
Right.
So if you look back on that road trip, while they went 4-1, it could have easily been a 2-3 road trip, you know, and your wins were over Memphis without Mike Conley and the Knicks without Enes Kanter, you know, and so neither of those wins are exactly overly impressive.
Right.
And the defense, going back to that road trip, is started to lapse a little bit during the road trip. It was just they were winning, so because they were scoring, the offense was playing the best it's played all year during that stretch, but then they came back home, and guess what? The offense reverted back to the form we had seen, you know, first 15, 20 games of the season. They weren't scoring a lot of points, but the defense didn't come back. The defense they relied on early in the year
so much
just was not
over-relying.
Yeah, and it just wasn't there. And so instead of, like I said earlier, instead of maybe some of these games where they were losing by 4 or 5 at home, or maybe CJ was having a shot at the end to tie it, you know, a 99-98 game, these games are now, you know, 110-98, or as we saw last night, 106-92.
Right.
You know, I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the difference right now. And I think the Blazers need to get back to that defensive identity, because I think they're going to still struggle to score in a lot of games this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I think the biggest reason they're struggling right now is their defense. It's honestly, it's fallen off a cliff.
Yeah.
Like, I looked up the numbers. During the losing streak, they're allowing 112 points in 100 possessions, which is, I mean, they're giving up like 14 points more per 100 possessions than they were doing earlier in the season when their defense was playing so well. That's a massive, massive difference. Through their first 17 games, they gave up 100 points or more 6 times. And in the past 7 games, they've allowed 100 points or more 6 of those games. Yeah. So they're not playing defense right now. The effort isn't there. The execution isn't there. And you're right, they need to get back to it. I think during this stretch where you don't have another game until Saturday, they're going to do some very serious film work. Yeah. They're going to look at film and see what's going wrong. And I think the majority of that work will be looking at the defense and where they're slipping up, because earlier in the season when they were winning, it was because of their defense. Even when their offense struggled, their defense was good enough that they were still winning these close games. And you got to hope that their offense will be a little bit better than it has been, because it's been really bad. But their defense has to get back to what it was.
I mean,
this looks like the defense from last year.
Yes, that was the thing. Looking back at the highlights on Bradley Beal, I mean, a lot of those buckets were just matador defense. Yeah. Let your man get to the cup. It just looked like he was surveying the court. He looked so comfortable out there. Yeah. When a dude is on fire, you've got to make life difficult. Now, I know it's easy for me to say from, you know, sitting in the bleachers, but man, it just looked so easy for Beal.
Yeah.
Layups.
I know. And you weren't sitting in the bleachers. You were sitting like right over there.
Yeah.
I saw you last night.
Yeah, man.
And I think they just lack identity, really, so far this season. I think they so much want to be the offensive team that they've been the last few years, that when they got hot during that road trip, because they had about 4 games, you know, where everyone was playing the best offense they played all season. They're averaging, I think, about 110 points a game down that stretch. That was like a 10-point jump from where they had been for most of the season. And I think they so much want to be that they forgot the reason that they were winning. You know, they're winning slightly more than they lost, but the reason they were winning those games was because they were one of the best defensive teams this year. And I think they kind of lost sight of that when the offense started picking up again. They thought, okay, here we go. We're used to this. This is coming back now. You know, the slump's over. Well, guess what? I think the 4-game stretch where they played really well was an aberration, as opposed to the 15-20 we saw start off. And this is something we talked about at the beginning of the year, roles on a team, and especially offensively. outside of Damian Lillard and C.J. McCollum, what is the roles of these guys right now? We're almost a third of the way through the season, and we don't know Evan Turner's role, Al-Farouq Aminu's role, Mo Harkless's role. There's a lot of guys contributing. Pat Connaughton, Shabazz Napier. We don't know really what these roles are for these players.
I think that is also the bad part about being able to shuffle the lineup a little bit.
Yeah.
Is because, yeah, you get to see what you have, but on the flip side, it's like, okay, what are we going with now?
No.
What do we like more? Who's going to step up? I think that we are getting to that point where you figure out what that identity is.
Yeah.
And if you're struggling to find said identity, you're in trouble.
I agree. I mean, next week they will be, after these upcoming 3 games, they will be a third of the way through the regular season. And we still don't know exactly what this Blazers team is. We see potential in them. They should be a playoff team, but they have these games where they just, it's not always a lack of effort either. It's just.
But what did you call them a couple of weeks ago? I think you said they were consistently inconsistent.
Yeah.
And
exactly what they've been.
And that was like 2 weeks ago. And what is it still? It's still that same thing.
Yeah.
You have games where it's a different problem every night. You can point to turnovers. You can point to defense. You can point to the lack of point production. It just blows my mind that they're finding different ways to lose. I mean, even one night, Terry Stotts blamed it on focus when they blew that 14-point lead in the first quarter.
Yeah, and I mean, and the problems that plague them offensively continue to plague them. You know, fast break, they're still getting nothing.
Yeah.
Last night they were outscored 16-0.
Yeah,
Fast
transition.
break against the Wizards. You know the last time they were outscored by 16-0?
Nah.
I can tell you because it was only 2 games ago against the Bucks. They were outscored 16-0.
That's painful.
In transition. The Pelicans 12-4. So over this 3-game losing streak, they've been outscored 44-4 in transition. That's 11 points a game right there that they're losing by.
And more than likely, those are easy buckets.
Exactly.
It
And
makes it so tough when you're working to get buckets and you're giving up easy baskets.
Yeah, and the Blazers aren't getting that whatsoever.
No.
And so, and C.J. McCollum is struggling right now, and they're not getting easy shots whatsoever offensively. And like we said, the defense, just like Jared said, has completely gone off a cliff over the last 7 games.
And I think that's where their focus needs to go. They need to get back to playing solid defense, and it is about, on defense, it's about the effort. Right now, you can see the difference on the court. They are not putting forth the same amount of effort as they were earlier in the season. That was, in the midst of this inconsistent season, that was one thing that was, until the past 7 games, that was one thing that was consistent, was their defensive effort, and they were winning because of that. And if you look at last season, their offense was good all year long. It wasn't until they fixed their defense after Nurkic came over that they started winning games.
Yeah.
So if they want to get back to winning, if they want to get back to competing, they've got to focus on the defense again.
And so you mentioning that it's not as much X's and O's or strategy or play calling or whatever we want to say. This is more of an effort thing. So Jason Quick had mentioned, had asked, is it time for a team meeting? Is that an overreaction? Should this be time where if it is effort, if that's what it is, I mean, doesn't that come down to you need to check each other? We need to talk about that.
And even if it's not effort, I think it's a time to have a team meeting. Like Jared says, they have 3 days off here. They don't play again until Saturday, and they play a really good team, possibly the best team in the NBA right now.
The best in the West, for sure.
This is a time to do some soul searching right now if you're the Blazers. And right now, you're only 2 games above 500. You're 13-11, and this is a team that really, at the beginning of the season, had aspirations not just to make the playoffs, but to win a playoff series and to be a serious threat in the West. And right now, they're not that. They just aren't right now.
Looking so much like a 41-41 team.
They're looking like what pessimistic Blazers fans would say. This is what they always are.
Right.
And that's
8
what
or
they've
7.
been. That's what they've been so far this season. And the good news is, in terms of that, the Western Conference, in the big picture, it looks like there's probably only 9 teams fighting for 8 spots.
Right.
So the Blazers really only have to beat out 1 team.
Right.
And
by default, they get in.
Yeah.
But do you want to be back in that spot
Right.
where you've got to face the Rockets or the Warriors in the first round?
And that's why I think, talking about whatever's going on, Damian outwardly is very, nonchalant. He says he's not concerned, he's not worried. Well, you can still be not concerned and not worried, but still have an edge about you and be like, guys, we have to fix this. What is going on? We're better than this.
And maybe he does,
Yeah,
and we just don't know.
see it. Yeah, exactly.
I don't even know if they necessarily need a team meeting. I think if they hold each other accountable, if they take these film sessions seriously, and everyone is held accountable, not just it has to be from stars down to role players, I think that can achieve the same purpose as a team meeting.
So let's talk